Okay, so Chris, it is really great to have you, on my little online show, or stream. And I know that, you did interview me and I talked and talked and talked. I did not shut up. It was crazy. But okay, so you've been in radio for a long time and
Mm,
you also you also have a live stream going right now and it's also recorded, right?
correct. Yes.
Okay, so what's it called?
The show is called BaseLine. I do it out of StreamYard, and I'm not tech savvy. I literally fall into tech. I hate tech. If tech had a behind, I would kick it. So I try my best to understand and navigate. I went through all these different streaming services, but StreamYard made the most sense for me. And I've been doing that ever since currently.
Okay, why do you hate tech?
Because I wish I would have spent more time learning more about tech. For me as a student, I was a knucklehead when I was in high school and things like that. I wish I would have applied myself more. But if I'd applied myself more, I wouldn't be so mad at technology.
But people can learn tech at any age. I mean, I teach computer skills to people who barely touched a computer. I mean, that's the whole thing about computer skills or tech is that it's always changing, so we always have to learn something new, even if we've been doing it for a long time.
No, I get that. I guess for me, constantly kicking my own behind since I can remember, I'm always hard on myself, and I've eased up a little bit over the years. But always, like most people, you become your own worst critic in what you do, and you want to do better and things like that. So that's just a part of my nature.
Okay. Well, then where can people find Baseline?
Best thing to go to is two streams. You can go to YouTube and type in the Chris Base channel, all one word. Base is spelled B as in broadcasting, ASE, channel with a period at the end of it. Go to YouTube, find that. Or you go to um, Facebook.com and type in Chris Base. You'll find me, not the other 1,600 people, but me. Then you find me, and then you see me live on Facebook. I do the show, so as well, both streams.
Okay. And you do that every week?
I do it every Saturday morning, 7 a.m. Central.
Okay. And how long have you been doing it?
Let's see. I moved the show recently. It used to be on Fridays at 4 p.m. Central. And I remember I couldn't do a Friday show, so I decided to do like a morning show just to kind of make up for it. And Saturday morning is a whole new life of people. People getting their weekend started, they're getting up, they scratch and go to the bathroom, things like that. You catch them right in the beginning of their weekend. And so I figured, let me move the show and challenge myself and challenge the show. And it's been growing. So I think, like anything else, you become competition with yourself. If you can challenge yourself, it brings out the better part of you, I think, as a broadcaster, podcaster, and communicator.
Oh, why is that? How's that?
Because, well, I think sometimes we get complacent and still in one place, and sometimes you're not careful, you become that place. An old saying says. So if you're constantly moving forward in some sort of dimension, I think you find out you can do things. You can get out of the rut. You can get out of state being in one time zone, and then when you start to do other time zones, not to say it's not possible, but challenging yourself, I think it's the best thing for yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, I want to talk more because some people are, especially, well, you're talking about not being into tech, but what do you think? How do you think people can challenge themselves, or what experiences have you had with that?
Well, it could be across the board, Margaret. It could be health. It could be personal. It could be professional. Sometimes the two blur. Like my love for radio, it's always been personal since I was 6 years old. So to me, it's always been like one thing for radio. And so I think, like anything else, when you're becoming up and I guess an aspiring broadcaster, you have to look at other people that you admire and see what makes them tick. And when I was teaching radio at Columbia College Chicago, my former my alma mater, I told my students, you use somebody as a blueprint to find your own voice. And so you can challenge yourself that way. So I think, once again, depending on the circumstances, do something outside of your realm of safety, and you just might surprise yourself.
Hmm. Wait, now when did you teach at Columbia?
I taught at Columbia from 2000 to 2004.
Okay. And how'd you like it?
I loved it.
Yeah, because I
I
teach
love.
there now.
Oh, well, how do you like it?
I like it. I mean, I like it because it's practical, and also I teach podcasting, and I tell the students this every semester. Every time we have an assignment or for the final assignments, I get, if I have like 15 or 20 students, I get 15 or 20 different episodes, styles. and everybody has a different kind of voice. Everybody's got a different interest. It's very dynamic. And I like how the students are all into something.
Yes,
It's a creative school. So,
it is. I was a student there when I went there. I got there in 1986, and then slept around for a little bit, and got on the college radio station WCRX 88.1 FM during that time. I came back to teach. In my second year, me and a colleague of mine, Cheryl Morton Langston, we were tapped to rewrite the talk radio course curriculum, and that was the highlight of my time there. To sit back in Cheryl's office, having various lunches, rewriting the curriculum, and teaching it together was the most fun I ever had there.
yeah. And actually, the only mentor I've ever had in my life is a professor there. And he taught me a lot about teaching certain kind of content, especially teaching. I also teach smartphone audio. And so he gave me a lot of good advice. And I still, go by with him, go by his office for with questions and so forth. He's really the only person who's really taken out the time to teach me things and help me out.
Well, who is that?
It's Matt Cunningham. And I speak very highly of the guy. I think even one time on LinkedIn I said that he's pretty much the only mentor I've had that I can. Yeah, I mean, especially in the radio business.
Yeah, I was blessed to have two. When I was 19 back at Columbia as a student, like most people, you want to get into music, radio, and stuff like that. And I heard this guy named Ty Wansley, who was doing a talk show on then WGCI AM when they were a talk station. And I was channel surfing one morning, and I couldn't stop listening to him. He was on from 5 to 9. I heard all 4 hours. The first time I ever listened to a whole show, non-music. And I got a chance to meet him. He became my guru. He became my Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I learned so much from him. And I miss him tremendously. And then my second mentor in radio and talk radio was a guy named Jay Marvin, who I met at WLS, and I was his first producer. And the difference between both styles of guys, because both of them, Ty Wansley was calm, cool, and collective, and Jay was combative and caring. And I just learned, I think, from the best from those two perspectives. And plus, like you said about Matt, they took time to put the arm around me and help me out. They didn't have to because they had their own thing going. But the fact that I bonded with them and I love them tremendously, I think even they're not with us anymore, I have no idea how much they affected me. They were just, once again, the Mount Rushmore to talk to me.
Yeah, so what made Ty's show so good to you?
Ty was just completely in control. Nothing rattled him. Phone callers, guests, he just stayed in the pocket and just stayed just professional. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that, man, because especially when you're talking to racist callers and certain guests who can be really out there, but he was able to maintain that. Jay was like opposite. Jay will call you a brainstem, tell you go straight to hell and things like that. And once again, the polar opposite. So what I learned from them is whatever your spirit or personality is, that's what you do. Don't go to a point where, unless you once again go back on the program director, he or she is giving you free reign to be yourself. That's the cool thing about personality-driven radio. Personality-driven content always works because it's you, and no one else sounds like you. No one else is you. No one else can be you. You are your authentic self. And once you embrace that, you can't be stopped.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people emphasize, being you and being yourself, but I think a lot of times it can work against you.
That's good too.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's good too, though.
Yeah. Well, because I mean, I've been in situations where I thought I was safe to be myself, and then I was knocked down or mocked or said, effing this, effing that. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, I'm not even doing anything wrong. I mean, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah, because I think some people are overcritical. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes when you are yourself, you take the hits, you take the losses, you take the W's and the L's. But that's the balance of life. I think what you can do from those experiences, how can I be better? Or maybe I need to be more of myself. And so again, it's a touch and go. Excuse me. With the exception of one program director, operations manager, I butted heads with all my bosses, all of them. I'll just share this with you because it's ancient history. Coming into talk radio and understanding that the audience is white conservative males, that's what you play to. So that's the success of that type of talk station, and excuse me, and most of them across the board. So I'm not conservative. and I'm not liberal. I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm an island unto myself. So it's kind of hard to gauge. And I also believe that if I was a conservative, my career would have skyrocketed. But I couldn't be my true authentic self. Look, I know people who switch teams. They were able to do the playbook because they needed a job, and I understand that too. I couldn't do that. I couldn't look at my family every day, and because some people are out there just they're very cruel and very mean. And had I been successful being a conservative talk show host, they would come after my family, and I cannot have that. So I'd rather stay safe because people are just nasty. I mean, we see people nowadays. I won't name any politicians' names, but they have no problem naming their families and their sons and daughters and things like that, where they are in danger. And these cyberpunks have been there since cyber technology started. So they'll come after you, come after your family, and that kind of bothered me. And plus, you have to live with that. If you cut that deal to say, okay, I'm gonna play the conservative book, that's the deal you cut. It doesn't mean everything will go right all the time, and you just have to, play the cards you're dealt with. But once again, I saw the people do that when they were liberal and they were out of work and needed to be a check coming in. They became conservative all of a sudden because they know the playbook. I just that doesn't still right with me personally. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, because sometimes I would listen to somebody and okay, I love talk radio. I'll just put it out there. But and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I would listen to somebody and I think they don't sound like they're really conservative because they didn't go deep. Or they're just and also they kept repeating the same ideas. So I would ask some people in the know, I'd say, is so and so really conservative or what's going on? And then some
Yeah.
people would tell me some stuff or but I'm thinking what you're describing, I'm really thinking about more the 90s and maybe early 2000s because now conservative talk radio, I don't think it's that big, is it? Really talk radio in general.
No, because we've seen the birth of podcasting, and that spread out the whole game completely. So you get any types of point of view and all types of content, all types of topics where it's more spread out. Before, as you know, back in the day, just the 90s and 2000s, that's all we had. So I think it's still strong conservative to the people who still follow it. But from the standpoint of voices altogether, yeah, everybody can talk now. It's a great thing.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I know there's some podcasts and streams, video casts, and where they're like simultaneous or whatever, and they
Mm,
are conservative and they do very well. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think with podcasting and digital, there's now more variety.
absolutely.
So I think what you're
Absolutely.
talking about is more like maybe WLS like over 20 years ago or something.
Oh yeah, but see, it sets the mark to a degree because that you have to have a finite starter point where you are to where it is now. Excuse me. So, like for example, my second operations manager at WLS is a guy named Mike Elder, and Mike Elder was the one that gave me the break to be on that radio station as a host because that was my goal from day one. And so I remember he told me to study the Rush Limbaugh show. I'm like, no, Mike, no, I don't want to listen. I mean, I don't really care from everything else. I know. He said, no, don't listen for content. Listen for style and execution of how the show was ran. Just want to get your take on it. That's what I did. Rush, to his credit, had a very tight program, programming wise. It was flawless. It was tight. Every element was hitting and it moved. It really was a fast paced program. So I got that perspective. Now, I'll just say this as once again, like being a talk radio fan like yourself. There were times when Sean Hannity would fill in as the host, guest starring for Rush Limbaugh. I preferred Sean because Sean at least had the other opposing side to call in during the program. Rush didn't. Rush had everybody agree with him. Ditto's Rush. I agree with that person you just said. That was all everything coming towards him that was, self-grandizing. But with at least with Sean would go back and forth with callers who didn't agree with him, which to me is more entertaining than just hearing the rhetoric all day long. At least you're hearing the second or the other side of you that people disagree with. So I like Sean Hannity from that point. I didn't like him altogether, but I appreciate that addendum that he had with filling in for Rush.
Okay, well, it's funny that you say that because I used to listen to talk radio like online. So I'd go to different stations throughout the country and I would listen to Sean Hannity's local show in New York. Did you ever do that? Did you ever
I did,
listen to
yeah.
his? Okay, his local show is really different. His local
It
show
is.
yeah, it was like we're hanging out, it's drive time, let's talk about different stuff. It was looser, he was warmer. but then when he would fill in for Rush Limbaugh, it was so simplistic.
Yeah, because he had to play the Rush's audience.
Yeah, that's probably it. And then also
Yeah,
he got that Fox News job, and then I'm sure he was insanely busy because he was doing both. And I just thought he was more simple, but yeah, you're right. Maybe he analyzed the audience and also how people went in and out. But Rush Limbaugh is a master. I mean, because I used to think to myself, oh my gosh, I know this guy is not telling the whole truth. Like he would, like, let's say there was an article and I would read
hmm
these articles and then he would stop part way and then he'd start commenting. And I'm like, shoot, I know there's more to the story, but he was telling a tale and he was so great at it.
yeah,
And he also made himself the protagonist of his story.
all the time.
Master.
Look, all the time. I give credit when credit's due. We did not agree ideology at all between Rush and myself, but the style again of his programming, the once again go at the personality driven program, and even the liners were just funny.
Yeah.
Don't think, I'll do your thinking for you. Rush Limbaugh, stuff like that. So it's no, he knew what he was doing. Like I said, for the
Yeah.
master at the craft, and again, you know your audience, you know you're placating to. I remember back in the day, I check out C-SPAN, the Life and Talk Radio. I was a fan of that too. So every market they have a different person coming on, and Rush usually came on Fridays, that Friday midday, and he would show them in person like everybody else throughout the week. Cliff Kelly from Chicago here on WVON. I think he was at WGC at the time, AM, doing his show. So it was nice to see all these different talk show hosts from different markets. And again, once you know your style, once you know what you've created, you're off to the races because now see everything from in here is executed. And so, like when you prepare for a show, I prepare for a show. I don't know about you, like with me as the host, it's cut in half 50% investigation, 50% off the cuff. So I usually go with that.
Discovery.
Exactly. Yeah, that usually works for me. And I kind of hear the show in my head first before I do it. And then everything matches up when you execute the program. And so for me, radio was just always magic. Was not saying that today's radio obviously is different. It's more corporate controlled, as you know. But man, before all that happened, just pure magic.
Well, John Williams is magic. For some reason, I've never been able to interview the guy, even though I've met the guy in different situations. I think he's one of the best talk radio people in the
I agree.
country on WGN. Yeah, because he's got his views, but even if you don't agree with him, I mean, you're along with for the ride, and he interviews people that he doesn't agree with, but the way he asks the questions are interesting, and he himself is an incredible personality. He's not flat. I think a lot of people are in talk radio on the broadcast, terrestrial, they're sort of flat because I think they feel like they have to hit some points or something.
Well, as you know, Margaret, what we do is very, very sexy. It's a sexy business. People want to be a part of it, and the on-air part in particular. So when I check out people, once again, I think John Williams is great. Even his days in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, stuff like that, and coming here to WGN. I mean, I love the guy. I love interviewing him too. Somebody like that is just incredibly cerebral. His answers and questions are just spot on, and that takes time to develop. And so, as us as hosts, we appreciate that because again, like I said, some people out here flat because they're doing the bare minimum to a degree, and probably have people, producers, writing their questions out, and they just playing parrot and just reading it off the cue lines and stuff like that, and not really being themselves. And some people don't know how to be themselves on the radio. They really don't. It's just like almost like a Jekyll and Hyde thing with certain people. Do you become yourself, or do you create a persona that you think would work?
Well, the good thing about John Williams is if you meet him off the air, which I have, he's very quirky in a good way, and he's a unique person, and he's gracious, but you can tell he's definitely flourished in the medium. And then you hear him on the air, and you're like, wow, this is the same kind of guy. And he's such a pro. And what's good about him is that he had time to develop his approach because he came up when there were smaller markets. So he was in Peoria for a while, and it was in Chicago. Then he went to Minneapolis, came back to Chicago, and he's done different things. And nowadays you don't really get that. You can do it on podcasting, but it's hard for it to translate to terrestrial.
Well, see, you have to understand the medium and what you have. Like, going back to WLS when I was there, and Mike Elder
And
was
sorry, when were
my.
you there? When were you there?
I was there from, let's see, 1994 to about 2005. I was fired 3 times.
Okay, that was the golden age though,
Oh, it
94.
was always magnificent. It was great. And go back to Mike Elder, when myself, um, Ski and Skinner, and the rest of us was on the weekends, we were the backup team, as we were called. So whenever, of course, Monday through Friday, lineup had to take time off, we were going and fill in for them. So he had to make sure they called us the bench. The bench had to be strong to go fill in for the starters. But I thought it was a great sports analogy. And we did that. And it was fantastic. As a matter of fact, I met Tony Brown through my time at WLS. Tony Brown is very famous for Tony Brown's Journal on PBS, aired for years. And so he was doing a show with this we had technology, of course, ISDN feed from New York to Chicago. And he was doing the show, but he kept missing the breaks a lot. So Mike had me come in to work with him, and I would do the breaks, kind of like, like a police, traffic cop. So I came in and partnered up with Tony Brown. Never met the man in person, but we spoke over the phone, obviously. We hit it off. We exchanged the topics we would talk about. And so we were on the air together from, let's see, Saturdays at 10 a.m. to noon. And one day we're doing the show, and he was doing a speaking engagement at another city. It was over the phone, and we do the first hour. Says, Chris, I got to go. You take over. Just like that.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, where you going? I got a
Whoa.
speaking engagement. I thought you could do it after the show. No, I got to go. You take over. You're ready. And I said, why are you doing this? Because somebody did it for me, and I'm paying it forward.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Wow, that's very generous of him.
very.
A lot of people are not like that.
No, not at all. No, not at all. And ever since then, we would take time off. Sometimes you'd be on for maybe half the show, or just let me just fill in over the 2 hours.
Oh. So how did you do that without any prep? What did you
Well,
talk about?
we still have to talk the topics. Like I just didn't do it with him. I just did it by myself and had the callers call in and stuff like that. So once again, it was a baptism by fire, but the fire felt good.
But
It
what
was
did you
nice
do
and
if
warm.
you what did you do if people didn't call in?
You still talk.
Yeah, so how did you know how to talk? Well, that's one thing is how do you know how to talk to a room with nobody in it?
For me, I'm always talking to one person. I'm not talking to a crowd of people. In my mind, I'm talking to one person. I read somewhere about Larry King, great Larry King, when he was on the Mutual Broadcasting System, and he would have a teddy bear in front of him, and he would talk to the teddy bear during his radio time. So in my mind, is one person. You just keep on going. As a matter of fact, it's funny you mentioned I keep on going with no callers. When I was a producer, I was sired to work with up and coming talk show hosts who were former FM jocks, and they would come in and get ready, and we would go. I said, let me tell you up front, the callers were not going to call in immediately because you're a new voice. They have to hear
Yeah.
you first. And then once they hear you and they feel comfortable, then they call in. If they don't, they got to keep on going. Now, I would tell these fools before we hit the mic, you know what happened? Hit the mic, we sign on the hour at 06 past the hour, take the weather break at 20, then all of a sudden, where's the calls at? I said, didn't I just tell you about? Didn't I tell you back in the green room?
Right.
So they were really leaning on calls as a crutch, which you should never do.
No.
You do that, you're dead, and
Yeah.
you shouldn't do that. Your job is to talk, no matter what the situation is. You're a talk host. It's not like a talk. You're not a caller host. You're a talk host. Your job is to talk. But when they put their minds on, I'm gonna all these phone calls, that's where it goes right sink into the water, and they never come back alive.
Well, that's why, Rush Limbaugh would say his stack of stuff because see, he knew, I know he came from music radio, but when you're hosting a show, you have to have a stack of stuff to
Yes,
go to if things slow down. But I
absolutely.
noticed that too about FM. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you're right. No, it's like with me, I learned how to prep just once again back in my days. That's the most time I spent there, and I would prep before I went on the air. Then 3 hours, 3 hours straight,
Yeah.
no interruption, cut my phone off and everything else. So by the time I hit that microphone, I'm off to the races. I know I got like 15, 20 topics to talk about, sometimes more than that.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, one time I was being interviewed. It was like maybe a 10 or 15 minute interview. I prepped for 4 hours
Mm-hmm.
because it was about my book, but I was thinking about all angles. Like, what if they ask me this? I have to be ready about this. And I know it's
Right.
even on podcasting, some guests, they don't research the show or the show, quote unquote, the
Right.
podcast, and they'll go on and they don't really have much to say. And I'm thinking, just because it's a
Yeah.
podcast it does not mean that you should not prep.
I had a guest one time, Margaret, who was recommended by a good friend of mine, and he was doing some good stuff in the neighborhood. He had worked with Muhammad Ali, and he does these charity events like that. So, all right, cool. So I had him on, and I was like, so Mr. Muhammad, would you tell me more about yourself? Well, I'm from Chicago, born on the South Side.
Okay. You and a million other people. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but I'm like, dude, give me some more to work with. And then I said, well, look, we got another 45 minutes. We got more to go. He said, yes, I told you in the email it's gonna be an hour.
Right.
And so he was just sweating bullets, and I had to really carry the interview just, because of the fact that he just couldn't talk or didn't feel that comfortable to do so, even though I talked to the man on the phone prior to the conversation we had. But by the time we had the show, he froze up on me. So yeah, he got out about, let's see, my show's an hour, so he got out about 45 minutes. And that was good, but I'll do the rest, obviously, because obviously some people just can't do it. And some people just get, whatever the case, they freeze up and get surprised. It is one of those things where, as a host, that you want people to talk. But you come on, when you came on the time on my program,
I
good.
should not shut up.
No, but that's great. No, that's great. You did a fantastic job. Only because of the fact that that's what you want as the host to guests. You want the guests to feel comfortable and go, not sit there and shut up. No, go, please, keep on going.
Although the question that you asked me that tripped me up was, who would you have dinner with? And I'm
Oh yeah,
thinking,
the four people, right?
I
Four
mean, I
people you
saw
would
the
have
people
dinner.
answer the question. I'm like, he won't ask me. And I'm like, oh, shoot, he did ask me. I was sort of prepared for that. But I didn't, I think I was talking because a lot of people don't interview me. And there are all these things I was thinking of that I thought, oh, okay, here's my chance to talk about it.
Yeah.
But I was gonna say also about having guests on that one time somebody did. I mean, I'm just gonna be general about this, but somebody one time kept bothering me to interview somebody,
Mm-hmm.
and it was for a recorded thing. And
Mm-hmm.
the person, even though they had a lot of experience, they barely said much. Like they talked and talked, but then when I listened to it, there wasn't much substance at all. So I basically edited it down several minutes,
Yeah.
you know. But I think that's also why some people don't want to go on these live streams because they know that they have to talk and it's live and they have to be very aware of what they're saying.
It could be pressure with certain people, Margaret. And I think what it is like, I don't know if you got this, I don't know if you did or not. What we do had take time and effort and sweat equity and stuff like that. You want to piss me off really quickly? Oh, I could do what you do. Oh my! And I get the red button immediately because it may come off easy, but it was never always this easy. And just because I'm talking does not mean that there was some skill set behind it. I remember one time I was back at once again back at LS. All these stories come from there, and there's one guy called up, "Hey, Mr. Bass, I hear you on time to time, and I like what you say, but you ain't nothing doing nothing but talking." I said, "Yeah, that's what I'm doing. It's a talk station." Oh yeah, but you and the rest, I could do what you do. Well, tell you what, let me put you on hold, talk to my producer, and let me come up here and do it. And I got pissed. So I remember my boss had called me and was going back to Mike Elder. Chris, you can't have people coming to the radio station doing the talk. I said, yeah, but again, I had to contain myself during that time. So again, it's when I hear stuff like that from people, it's like a blessing and curse. I'm glad that I've arrived to the point where people think that it's easy, but at the same time, I get annoyed because it didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of years to perfect what anybody does.
Well, people don't say that to me because I don't have much exposure. I purposely sort of keep it low, so nobody says these kinds of things to me.
Oh,
But
you're
anyway,
lucky.
I'm sorry. Yeah. No, so let's go back to WLS. You said you were
Sure.
fired 3 times.
Yes, I was.
How did you, yeah, go ahead.
So the first time I was there, my first, let's see, so my second radio station at the time I got at LS, and that was the station I wanted to go to. So I hit the jackpot, and let's see, the year I was being fired was interesting because they created, it used to be AM and FM simulcast. They split the FM into a younger sounding demographic station called WLS FM Talks. And Jay Mar went over there. They hired some new people, and what they were trying to do was get the audience from the loop. The loop was deteriorating. Jonathan Brandmeier had quit. Steve and Gary had broken up. They put Steve on the AM and Gary on the FM. They put Kevin Matthews on the FM. So everything was discombobulated. So I guess the people back at LS were saying, let's try to get that audience and create a whole new demographic. Ironically, it was working because they had nowhere to go. And I was a producer. And so we did it for 1 year and then fired everybody except for Jay. They brought Jay back to the AM to do 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Everybody was let go. Robert Murphy and Terry Ryder and Johnny Vaughn, who I was producing with. I was the only producer fired. Only talent was fired, but myself, and I was fired too, which I always thought was personal because I didn't get along with the boss. I didn't like him. He didn't like me. So, as you know, being a producer, you adapt. You have to get fired, but unless you do to yourself. And so I was let go. And then I got a call from Mike Elder, who became the second operations manager at that time. He said, I want to meet with you. I said, okay, fine. So I met with Mike Elder, and the first boss was Drew Hayes. So that's the person I didn't get along with. Second person was operations manager Mike Elder. He said, I've had a meeting recently, and I heard what my predecessor done a lot of bad things. And so we had a meeting recently with the staff, and I said, name a person or persons you thought was let go unfairly. Your name came up 9 times.
Wow.
I was like, right. I was like, damn. So he said, I can't undo what he did, but let me offer you this. I have a board op position overnight from midnight to 5, midnight to 6 a.m. going to early Saturday morning. I can offer you that. I said, Mike, I would love it to take it, but my goal is to be a talk show host, and I can't do that behind the board. I'll do you one better. If you take this board op position, I will train you to be a talk show host. And that's how I got back in the second time. So every payday Friday, back when we had cassettes, I would go into the production room and do a mock monologue for 20 minutes. And then I would go in with him. I had my, legal pad and pen, and he would dissect what I did right and I did wrong, mostly wrong at that time, but I was learning. And that was 6 months straight until one fateful Friday, same as usual. How you doing, Mike? Here's the tape, pops it in. I got my pen and pad ready. Listen to it. He turns around, you're ready.
Hmm. Yeah,
And I went from there.
what was an indication that you were ready? And what were your issues that made you not ready?
Um, I think again, going back to my theory, the people I talk to, when you admire someone from an perspective, when you admire somebody, and dare I say, love them, subconsciously you're doing them when you're on the radio. Subconsciously you're trying to be them, and it's kind of like a psychosis thing, I think. And I think I was sounding too much like other people, which was the problem. By the time I did like the last 3 months, I was finding my own voice, which Mike was saying. So by the time I did that last one, it was completely me. And then the
And then who
topics,
are you? Like how would you define yourself?
I would say informative and somewhat entertaining.
Hmm. Okay.
That's how I describe myself. That's how I describe the show. And so from that point, I was able to go on. In fact, there was a guy I used to produce. His name was Nate Clay, and Nate used to be on overnights on the weekends. And Nate did a 6-hour show. He would be on 5 hours from midnight to 5, and then midnight to 6 a.m., and then going into early Monday morning, midnight to 5, when Donna Roma came on at 5 a.m. So I had no problem filling in for him because I produced the show. So I cut my teeth doing a 6-hour talk show and a 5-hour talk show. And then everything else was just easy.
It is very hard to be a producer and be on the air. Usually you don't get those breaks.
That's true.
So why do you think you got them?
Well, I do believe in higher power because I'm not that smart. I do believe that you got to stop getting in your own way from
What does
time to
that
time.
mean? What does that mean?
Well, that means that sometimes you become afraid of no. I heard the word no more than yes,
Yeah.
but that one yes can change the game. Like going back to what Mike did for me. Mike didn't do that for me, but he did because of the person he wanted to mention about people like John Williams off the air. Mike being an operation manager, he was just a great guy, period, and believed in doing the right thing. He didn't know me from a can of paint. but he set everything in motion for me to be where I am right now talking to you. He was the one. So I always give Mike all the credit. So I think, again, not getting your own way. And then some people just put you in the box. Going back to Drew Hayes, no offense, we have meetings every month. And he told us in meetings, look, you guys that run the board and producer, you guys are grunts. Don't think about being on the air. You don't have the talent for it. Stay in your place. Yeah, what do you want? Drew, didn't you used to be a producer? That's different. That's different. I'm like, that type of stuff. I'm like, it's just ignorance. And they'll put you in that box, and you're supposed to stay in that box. If you have more ideas just to be a producer, fine. When I first got to LS to get the board op job, I told them from day one, my job is to earn the right to be on that microphone. I don't want to give it to me. I want to earn it. So let me go be a board op. Let me go be a producer. And the next step will be talk show host. So once again, you're right. It doesn't happen like that. And I had some other producers that were jealous of me because I had their road was different than mine. So I can't be accountable for them, only for myself. And once again, being blessed, being able to be with someone like Mike who believed in trying to cultivate new talent, which was me and other people during that time. And it goes back to timing. As you know, right place, right time. And I think everything else falls into place.
Okay, so once again, because a lot of people use that phrase, get out of your own way, but they don't explain it. So practically, how can people get out of their own way?
Stop being scared. Stop being afraid.
You're saying that it's fear. Being
Well,
in your own way means you're blocking yourself.
yes, absolutely. I believe it's fear because the fear is when you get knocked down, do you get back up again? When you've heard no, say 27 times, do you get up for 28 times so it won't be a no? And once again, it's like, look, I'm tired of no, let me stop. No, don't stop. Because if you stop, then they win. My parents always said, never let the bastards get you down. And some people just like that. Some people just in their DNA, they just want to destroy you. They don't like you. Well, I was getting kicked out when I got into professional radio was, you hear people don't like you. It's like, I don't like them. Well, why come you don't like them? I don't know. That makes no sense. It's idiotic. And so, but see, people be like that no matter what walk of life they run into. We just have to be in an industry that's so personality driven that we just get this all the time, no matter what walk of life is. But still, that would just get I would get a funky kick. How to if you? I guess I don't know. I'm slow. If you don't like somebody, have a reason not to like. Don't just manufacture something, which a lot of people do, and then they on the haterade. I'm like, why? But once again, why do you hate that person? I don't know. Well, that's stupid. Why don't you take the energy and put it somewhere else? But again, getting in your own way, I believe, means fear. You have to be strong. You have to understand that uh, sometimes you just have to take the punches. It goes back to the movie Rocky Balboa, when Rocky's talking to his son outside of Adrian's, the restaurant that he named after his late wife. He said, you got to be able to take the hits and keep moving forward. And I strongly believe in that. You got to get hit. That's going to happen. Take the hits and keep moving forward.
Well, I think that also eventually there comes a point. Well, anyway, first of all, I want to say that I did notice that in radio that there are a lot of people who want to take you down, even if you're passionate about it, or they just find a way to hate you for no reason. It can make you very paranoid. But
Correct.
how did you keep your eye on the ball though when you were aware of the haters?
They can't take away the fact that when I was 6 years old, I loved radio. They don't know that. And that's what kept me eternally going. When I was 6 years old, my parents bought me a replica in like 1930s oak wood kind of triangular shaped radio. And I love that radio ever since. And the sounds and music and the voices coming out of that was, again, I said before earlier in the conversation, pure magic. So by the time I got to working professionally, I describe it like the original Wizard of Oz with Dorothy played by Judy Garland. When you go from black and white and she lands in Oz, open the door, there's color. When I got the color part, that was like me entering the radio business. And so they, meaning the haters, can't take that away from me. They never could, because that's internally who I am.
Yeah, because it's sort of like also with podcasting, because some people start a podcast or live stream, even on Twitch or whatever, And
Mm-hmm.
then they think, oh, I don't have 1,000 followers, so I want to quit. And then I'm thinking, but if you love to do this stuff, whatever it is, whatever your content is, that should be carrying you through.
It should. It should.
Now,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Hmm.
go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Now, I was going to say that what happens if, somebody doesn't really love doing something and they don't have a lot of followers or views or whatever, or listens.
Well, they have the option to quit if they want to. I mean, that's their life. For me personally, it goes back to quality versus quantity. You have all the numbers you want to, and that's what get people over. But like for me, for example, when I checked out my Facebook Live videos, go back and I check it out. I think the highest I ever had numbers, we call it plays now. We look at Facebook Live, like 257, which is a lot for me personally.
Yeah.
So I don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I thank my audience. I thank the fact that people are checking the program out, and it will grow in time. And you got to figure it's you and a gazillion other people out here. So you're just trying to keep head above water, if that. And I think, again, if you love it, it's not going to go away. It's the passion that drives you. And somebody's checking you out. Somebody likes what you're doing, and they appreciate that too. So once again, it's to me one on one. We talk to one person, and then one to the masses, but always one on one.
Yeah. And then when you said you were 6 and you listened to radio, what kind of radio did you like throughout the years?
Oh man!
And why did you love radio so much?
To close your eyes and let your imagination go, there is no price tag for that. For me, also, I love sounds. I'm an audiophile. I even love old time radio, what I got a chance to listen to. So my mom used to be a school principal, and so she had turned me on to, and then WBEZ 91.5 was owned by the Chicago Public School System. So every week on their station, they had something dedicated to education and homework, stuff like that. But then at 7 o'clock, they would have an hour of old time radio. So they would have the Lone Ranger, the Shadow, the Green Hornet, and shows like that. I would listen to them. I was like, that's cool. And so even for me, right to this day, listen to old time radio. I'm a fan of The Shadow. I think that's probably one of the most brilliant programs I ever heard. And then The Saint. The Saint, for me, voice wise, it gets no better than Vincent Price. Vincent Price is the quintessential Saint on that era of radio, and I can listen to it all day long. So my love for radio, no matter what the format is the fact that you're creating that type of sound, that type of enthusiasm, that type of attention that gets you involved. So yeah, radio is me and I'm radio. We're bound like this.
Okay, now so you're talking about radio terrestrial, and then of course throughout our lifetimes, then podcasting came out and so forth. So do you think that podcasting is similar? What do you think about it?
I think podcasting has more freedom, and you're not restricted by terrestrial radio. It has more of an edge to it. You're able to be more free thinking, I think, and then you just go, and you're not clamped down, you're not handcuffed. And like with me and podcasting and being on the internet, I got on the internet because I couldn't find a job in terrestrial radio. I'm not gonna sit here in front. I was part of an earlier version of internet radio called psiradio.com. For those of you may know that we have a local broadcaster here on WLS Channel 7 named Cheryl Burton. And Cheryl Burton's been on for years. Her
On
brother, Bill,
TV, on
on
TV.
TV, right, correct. And doing news, being a news anchor. Her brother, Bill Burton, was the one I met, and he was the one that was created at the time, psiradio.com. And I started off doing a sports show on there with some other people. And then during that time, I would pitch the show that I'm doing now, which is called BaseLine. So I want to do a straight talk show, no holds barred, all types of topics, all types of freedoms, and not be constricted. So when I pitched that idea to them, after about 4 months doing the sports show, I was given a slot for BaseLine and haven't looked back. It's been fun, a lot of fun, especially when you create something and it comes to fruition. As you know, it's beautiful.
Well, so when you were doing the internet thing, how long were you doing it for?
Oh man, I was
Yes, I.
let's see, I was at PSI in like the mid 2000s. In that time, yeah, about 2005 or so. Yeah,
And then how long did it last?
it lasted for a couple of years. Once again, finances and things happened, and it became defunct. But it really had great potential. We really had some good people on there that worked there. Deborah Rowe, who was a former co-worker of mine back at WLS AM Radio, she was operations manager, did the show. Um, Matt McGill and Perry Small from WVON were there at one point, and they were growing talent. My show was on there, and so we really had great potential to really do some damage. But again, it's all about timing. So um, it just stopped, and we all were let go. But for what it was worth, it was a lot of fun. It really was for that time, and that's when I got a chance to actually do baseline from here to here and execute and put out there. And once again, you just when you create something, you know this as yourself as being a host. We're very territorial what we do because we want the program to work, and we're very meticulous about it. And so when we create the show and then bring people on, it's still a matter of execution style and what did the audience get out of it. And so all that is just one of those things where you become a mad scientist. You know, you're in the lab, got the white coat on, and you're trying to create and you add and subtract. And so when it starts to work, it is just a glorious feeling. And so I've been blessed to have that.
So I know you love radio, so do I, but I'm just saying that, because you're expressing the passion that I have. But what do you think of TV? Do you have a passion for TV?
I do, but it depends.
Have you ever worked
Nowadays,
in TV?
uh, I'm a scripted TV person. That's just my thing, and some documentary. I'm looking forward to the new documentary coming out on Disney Plus, Idea Man, the Jim Henson documentary coming out. I'm looking forward to that. Ron Howard directed it, and Jim Henson is one of my heroes. I mean, you're a certain age, you don't know who Jim Henson is, then you need to be hit upside the head. I mean, Jim Henson is the guy who changed the game from like the Sesame Street, obviously, and even before that, appearing on shows like the Tonight Show and some of the variety shows with Kermit and other puppets, and of course the Muppet Show. What was amazing about the Muppet Show was nobody wanted to air it here in America. Nobody. All the three networks, CBS, NBC, ABC, declined it. You had to go overseas to London, to Britain, to produce it. And then, it was a very successful. In fact, the guest who came over there had to sign a confidentiality agreement not to spill the beans about where it was being broadcasted from. And it was syndicated. I used to watch it as a kid. So I remember the Thames logo at the end. I used to watch Benny Hill and Monty Python from the same production company. So I knew it was overseas as a kid. So to see that coming to fruition, they merged down the road with Disney and things like that. I mean, I'm looking forward to the documentary. So stuff like that interests me. And certain shows I watch, it varies from time to time, but yeah, it depends on what's out there.
Yeah, I love documentaries. Have you seen the one about Cosby?
Yes, yes. Yeah, that's
It's something
deep.
like we need to talk about Cosby or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly right. It had like what 3 or 4 parts to it at one point. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it was. But you know what? It was fair.
It was fair, yeah.
It was a fair, because I've seen other documentaries and they take the slant immediately, but they went back and did their research of what he was before all this happened. It was a great storytelling because people forget Cosby won 3 Emmys on NBC doing I Spy. And for the first time as Black people, this is the same time Amos and Andy was on when I Spy was on. So what would you watch? You want to watch some bumpkin stuff like that on, Amos and Andy? Do you watch somebody who's a Rhodes Scholar, plays and various instruments, speaks 5 languages, very, educational. So it changed the game. So a lot of people understand Cosby was it before all this other stuff happened, unfortunately. So it disdains the legacy, but I do respect the man for what he's accomplished and what he contributed to television and education.
Yeah, you mentioned Amos and Andy. What do you think about those kinds of radio programs from back in the day?
Those type of programs obviously were a hit, but again, you're talking about, for example, Amos and Andy was like a hit for like 20 something years, something outrageous, something like that. And you just had these two white guys pretending to be Black and over a stereotypical dialect and things like that, where people thought they were actually African American. And then when the TV show hit, then they obviously couldn't go on there with blackface; they get sued. But then he had to hire Black actors, and I put it like this: I went back and watched some of those episodes. They're not that bad. They really were very well written. I think the Kingfish character was hilarious, but the pressure going into it at that time. There was one documentary I saw where one of the guys was an actor on there, and he said look, it was a job. I had to pay bills. I had children and a wife. We moved out there, and he remember the NAACP came after him, stuff like that. So I think had it not had the pressure of racism, it would have been off. It would have came off differently. But for some of those episodes, they really weren't that bad. They really, I'm going to say here up front, very good sitcom, established characters, but you throw in the racist aspect to it, it just destroys everything. But yeah, and I heard some of the radio shows too. Well, yeah, it was what it was, but it's still, yeah, the racist thing. Obviously, you can't escape that.
Yeah, and then what do you think of Rochester on Jack Benny?
I think he had the best role of all time. I think Jack Benny understood once again characters, not race, and him playing, the miser and always being 39 years old and having his wife and Rochester and Dennis and everybody else. I mean, and Phil, he knew how to use the characters intermittently with the program. I mean, really, that was the birth of the sitcom. If you think about it, on radio and television. Certain people couldn't steal from Jack Benny. Jack Benny was a true original. One of my favorite lines, and of course, has been said all over again, where he's being robbed, and the guy asks him, "Your money or your life? Your money or your life?" I'm thinking it over. I mean, that is classic, man. And so going back to Jack Benny, I thought Rochester was the perfect um, back and forth. He was never a foil. He was just as equal with everybody else, and that really changed the game too, as well. How blacks were being portrayed, even on radio and sitcom. I think Rochester was brilliant.
Yeah, because I read something. I read this biography of Jack Benny, and I read a lot. I read a lot about Jack Benny, and somebody said, "Well, Rochester wasn't a racist kind of role because he was the wiser one.
Right.
Jack Benny was the idiot, and Rochester always had good answers." And then I think in real life, he was paid very well, and he lived a
Mm-hmm.
really good life in L.A. So
He did. He did. And you got to thank people like Jack Benny who understood, once again, not race, obviously, but the comedy dynamic of how the show would work. And once again, I remember as a kid, they even did a cartoon based on Jack Benny. It was Looney Tunes, and they brought in the original people, Jack Benny and Rochester do the voice of the mouse, and they were all mice and Mises together, stuff like that. I thought it was hilarious. So that type of popularity, you can't once again put a price tag on it. But yeah, those type of shows to me stand the test of time. I mean, they were just so great and still great right to this day, depending on your ear and how you listen to it.
yeah, and I was gonna say, based on some experiences I had, that I think everybody should take a class or there should be training in media companies about how Black people, African Americans have been portrayed in the media because there are things happening today and people aren't aware that it's actually wrong to portray certain people or edit them a certain way. And what do you think about that?
You're spot on. I think what happens is that the stereotype is more easy to do because it's a caricature and you're able to expound on it and expand it and things like that. And there should be some understanding, not only just African Americans, but the LGBTQ community and everybody else involved. Once again, everybody has money to some degree. And if you're looking at advertisement, as you see before with Disney, Disney never at one point advertised the point of gay couples and lesbian couples being together. Well, everybody goes to Disney World. I mean, it doesn't matter what sex you are, but you notice in the commercials over the years, you see more people of color, you see more mixed families, you see more gays and lesbian families coming together and things like that. So whoever back at the marketing, say for Disney and others, realized that the strength of the dollar is across the board. The dollar is green, no matter what color the person is, in that perspective and what race they are. So we still have more strides to do, but I've always said, Margaret, racism is the never-ending battle.
Now, what do you say about people who say people are very too sensitive about that and people shouldn't be so upset? I'm just thinking about devil's advocate here. People shouldn't be so upset about that or sensitive about that issue. It's not really an issue. And I'm
Well,
talking about media stuff.
yeah, it is an issue. It always will be an issue. But if you don't want to subscribe to it, that's cool. It's look, you have your life, you have your bills to pay. I get it. But for the rest of us, from the dynamic of continuing to make change and awareness, then it is personal. Like whoever said the line, "Don't take it personal, just business," vice versa. Yeah, they're about to get their ass kicked because it's always personal to me, no matter what they say. They just said that to prevent themselves from, getting a mud hole stomped in their face. They knew that anytime if you go to a job and you put your hard work into it and you do your 9 to 5, it is personal. You want a good rating, you want to move in the company, you probably want a better salary, a better place to live and everything else. So it's always personal. The business and personal have become intertwined. So the personal aspect of the whole thing is to try to be as fair as can be. Not everybody's going to be fair across the board, but at least attempt to be fair as you can be. Let's give it a try.
But then sometimes fair means that other people, sometimes people will argue that it's not based on merit anymore. It's based on like clicking boxes or checking boxes.
Yeah, that's true too, because you get the likes and the thumbs up and the hearts and everything else. Then you have a following, and everybody wants to find out what the next clickbait is going to be and things like that. So you have to understand maneuvering through that type of thing. What's going to work, what's not going to work. Once again, being more in tune to your surroundings. Some people do all this stuff, don't even know what's around them surrounding wise. Know your surroundings, know what you can do. Try to make a change somewhere, because you got to get inside the building in order for change to happen, because it starts with you.
Yeah. And then what about so you mentioned WLS a lot. Okay, so does that have the biggest influence in on your radio life? Because I know you've
Oh,
done other stuff.
oh, absolutely, absolutely. I couldn't have asked for a better radio station to learn from. Like most of us growing up, hearing those call letters, you could say in your sleep. Um, One story I remember, one of my colleagues, and it's funny to say, my colleague, I grew up listening to him, news anchor Jeff Hendricks was retiring during this time. I was the overnight board op. I see him every morning. We would talk about, we love basketball. We talk about the Jordan era, stuff like that, when Jordan was playing for the Bulls. He was retiring. So I got him a Jordan outfit. I got him a Jordan baseball cap, jersey, and shorts for his retirement. At that time, Margaret, he had been at WLS AM radio for 33 years. At the time, I was 33 years old. And I said goodbye to him and gave him a hug and a kiss on the cheek and everything else. And I walk out and I literally bump into Larry Lujak. Literally. I said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hey, yeah, you got great pipes, kid. How you doing? I was like, I'm doing good. What are you doing here? Well, I'm here to surprise Jeff. He doesn't know, because he flew in from Santa Fe, New Mexico, or something like that. He was like, I flew in, I'm tired, but I know he's retiring. Don't tell anybody. We're going to surprise. So I was, just to literally bump into Lou Jack was worth it. And to say to me I had great pipes, I was good for the rest of the morning just to hear that. So it's brought me a lot of joy, a lot of grief, because the two go both hand in hand. But my time there, I couldn't have picked a better place to learn. It was great. It was, again, magical. Everybody was just on places like the golden years of the rebirth of talk radio. It was fantastic. It was the mecca for me to be there, and once again to learn from people who wanted to teach. Not everybody's going to take time out to talk to you, but the ones who did, I met great people there. Still have bonds right to this day. From an honor perspective, it was I couldn't have asked for a better time to be there.
And then what about how did you deal with I know that's you're hired back when you got fired, but how did you deal with being fired?
Let's see. The first time I
How'd
got
you
drunk.
take it?
Well, the first time I got drunk, my friends. In fact, in fact, I was on the phone at home, and I was talking to a friend of mine, and they interrupted the phone call. The operator did, and it was my senior producer, Keith Spence. Say, Chris, you had to come in. Drew wants to talk to you about something. I said, well, can you tell me over the phone? He was like, no, you got to come in person. I'm like, okay. So I get in my car, and I knew it was a sign. First of all, it was raining heavy that day. Very miserable, gloomy day. And then I get in the car. I listen to the score, 670, the sports station. At the time, Gene Lamont, who was the manager of the White Sox, he got fired. I was like, okay, I'm getting fired. This is too many signs from above. So I get in there, I walk in, I see Drew. Chris, have a seat. I'm fired, right? He was like, how'd you know that? I said, hey, man, I just had a sign from above. So he wished me well and all and everything. And once again, people were like kind of salty because, again, the on-air talent was let go from the FM, and I was let go too. So once again, it was personal. So I walk out the office, people, saying goodbye and they were sorry and everything else. So I went to the computer at my old terminal, and I crafted a letter to everybody that I was let go unfairly. This is BS. I hope Drew goes back to hell where he belongs. I wish myself well in my future endeavors. I said it out to everybody. That's how upset I was. And even though it was retracted very quickly. So I go to the control room, and everybody, of course, heard the news and said, "What are you going to do next, Chris?" "I'm going to get drunk." "Okay, we'll get drunk with you." So I waited until 6 o'clock. We walked over to Mother Hubbard's, and I never paid for anything that night for food and drinks. So don't worry, we got you. And as sad as it was glad to have friends who understood what I was going through. And it was just very emotional. The first one always hurts. I mean, it stings. It haunts you for a long time. But then become a veteran, you kind of see when it's going to happen. You kind of know the sixth sense, your spidey sense is tingling when you know you're going to be fired. But that first one always stings. So the second and third time, I didn't want it to happen, but again, it's just how the business is, and I've just been blessed to come back. The second time I came back was once again through Mike Elder, my operations manager, back on the AM. The third time I was back was when the FM needed people to help program the Christmas music before it became Kicks Country during that time. And that's the third time I was brought back. Then, let's see, I was able to go back to the AM to be a talk host. And I was let go because I said something wrong about President Bush too.
Okay. On the air?
And that seems
On
strange
the air?
because on the air, yeah. On the air, I was talking about the Gulf War, and I was saying that we shouldn't have been there in the first place. And the only reason why he's there is because, his father's legacy, and he has his father's cabinet, doesn't really have his own people and everything else. And I blasted the president because the stories that people were calling in who were veterans did not agree with the Desert Storm War and everything else. And I was agreeing with the veterans. But because of that, I guess people called up and, how dare, but they called me during the shows, like, how dare you talk about our president like that and things like that. And I called my boss, and he eventually had to make a decision. And instead of fighting for me, he let me go.
Well, it's also like you were saying, I mean, the audience was a certain way.
Yes.
And you weren't delivering that.
Right, exactly.
But then also, yeah, so I guess you have to think about the format. But what about when you're fired? Well, what I notice is this, that some people for a fact I know were fired. See, at least you're admitting that you were fired, because some
Yes.
people will be fired, but then they'll go online and they'll say, "Oh, I was laid off." And I'm thinking, "No, they were fired. There's a difference. I've been laid off. I know." So there are a couple times where I think like you're talking about the spidey sense.
Yes.
I had a feeling I was going to be fired. And actually one time, one person who told me, "You're going to be fired." I'm like, "Oh crap." So then I avoided that. And then another time I really was laid off, because when I was laid off, the person said, "I'm really sorry. But I hope you don't go anywhere. Just, keep in touch." So I thought, okay, this is definitely a layoff.
Mm-hmm.
But what do you think about the people who are in radio and they sort of put information out there that doesn't really represent the truth about themselves?
Well, I think with certain people's personalities, they want to come off as though I was the one that walked. They're going to spin the narrative to themselves, and they want to save face, and they want to come off as though that they were the heroic one. But you and I both know that, like you said before, it's like your ass got fired, man. We want to spin it your way. I think the truth is best. I mean, it is what it is, or was what it was. So you want to categorize it, and that's what happened. My time at WLS was great, and once again, it was not so great. I mean, that's just life in general, like I said before. And then even my time at WVON, when I worked there in production, now they call it imaging. I was part-time production, and then got a chance to be on air there as well. And
How long
so,
were you there for?
let's see, I was at VON, let's see, mid 90s in the beginning. And then I was brought back when the station moved to the South Side. And that was around the 2000s. So I was brought back then during that time to do some news anchoring and also host my own talk show on the weekends. So again, it goes with ebb and flow. You get fired, you get hired. And during that time, again, when you're on the air and things are rolling and everything is hitting on all cylinders, nothing like it. Nothing like it. It's nirvana.
Mhm.
It really is.
Yeah, you're in the zone. And people say that also about stand-up comedy. When you have the audience with you, it's like that. But okay, when you were doing talk radio on WVON and when you're doing on WLS, were they different kinds of shows?
I did the same show for me because I didn't want to change my style. But I think once again, whatever the topic is, applies to everybody. Now, if it's more African American centric, I did on both stations, depending on what the topic was. And so, like for example, I did a topic one time about um, people who I deem great, and who do you deem great could be somebody in your life or somebody you admire. And one of my people I admire the best is James Earl Jones. I think the man is just dynamic. When I was 18, I saw him here at the original Goodman Theater with my high school class, and we saw him in Fences, the August Wilson play, and he was then and still is my idol, and I got a chance to see him on stage. Nothing against television and movies, but stage is where that man is. The man is like 6'3", the booming voice and everything else he commands. I mean, you can't keep your eyes off of him. I just loved it. And so James Earl Jones stutters. And a lot of people didn't know that. And I was like, I had to give the man all the credit in the world. This man was also on Broadway doing The Great White Hope in the 60s. And his understudy was John Amos, who went on to play in Good Times. You're on stage with eight nights a week, and you had a stuttering problem, but nobody knows because you mastered so well and you trained your voice and your vocal cords to the point where nobody would know. And I said, man, I mean, that to me just made me love him even more for him to even go past that. So it depends on the topic, but I would try to do both styles on both radio stations.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that it's sort of you were talking about earlier about standing in your own way, and obviously James Earl Jones didn't stand in his own way. I'm sure he had a lot of struggles
Mm-hmm.
in general. So, but speaking of struggles, okay, so you mentioned there's racism, and I did interview somebody else. It was for the INBA, and he was giving me specific examples. He came from TV, now he works in public radio in
Mm-hmm.
Illinois, and he was just giving me different examples. But would you say that you encountered it in your career?
You don't want to go there
Okay.
with racism because to me it has to be the ultimate last resort. I try to give people the benefit of the doubt that they're not,
Okay.
for whatever reason that they have. But when you look at what's getting the people around you, and not too many people of color being promoted, and in the radio station, things like that, it's kind of like, well, what else could it be?
Mhm.
You have your quota here, but you don't have your quota over there. And so it just, I'll give you a perfect example. I mean, I never thought it was racism, but it got on my nerves. So I remember non-weighted Roma. They used to be the morning show on WLS AM Monday through Friday.
Gosh, that was such a great show.
Oh, they were fantastic. So they had an audition for a new producer, which I decided to go for. Now here's the deal. I told my then um, senior producer, her name was Diana. I told Diana that I said, I want to audition, but if I'm wasting anybody's time, let's not. I don't want to waste your time. My time is valuable to me. No, that's fine. I said, let me say it again for the cheap seats. If I'm auditioning for this, make it legit, not something that you're saying is fair. So I had one day to audition, what I thought was strange, because other people had like a week, 3 days, at maybe 3 to 4 days. I had one day. So that gave me a red flag right there. And so I go do the research of the topics. I go to Don and Roma. They rejected every topic I gave them.
But is it because did they have somebody else in mind? But let me ask you that later, maybe.
But yes, but had they told me that, I would have wasted my time even trying to audition.
Right.
Some people know the truth. Margaret, it'd beat them in a half moon. They can't. They buy into the lie so much is what they do. All I said was a fair opportunity to do. If you have somebody else in mind, then cool. I'll step back. You won't hear anything from me. But no, we'll try that one day. And it was one of the most embarrassing days of my life because they rejected everything that I did to the point where I had to leave the room because I guess they thought I was incompetent or they gave me the game. And I love Donna Roma. Don't get me wrong. We patched up and made up throughout the years, but that one hurt. And had they've been honest with me, going back to Diana, I wouldn't even wasted my time.
So did they,
So,
but literally, did they have somebody else chosen before the whole audition thing?
but see, that could have been the game too, because again, going back to the person, put it like this is when I knew it was the fix was in. So back then we had reel to reels. So I had to put the reel to reels of the best of the host throughout the week that's going to be aired the weekend on Diana's desk. She had her calendar out. So my name was on that Wednesday, our so-called audition. The other person's name was throughout the week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and next week. So that person who had his names on the calendar, he got the job. He got the job. He could have had that Wednesday. You know what I'm saying? So some people just don't know how to operate fairly. They just
Yeah.
don't. So yeah, that was a complete waste of time. But and you don't want to throw in racism, but sometimes it crosses your mind from time to time. And once again, what happens is whoever's in power divvies out the most privileges, and that's all walks of life. I'm talking about radio here as a particular example. And so you may not feel comfortable with someone of a certain skin tone or a sex or something like that. Some people just they're built differently. I don't necessarily agree with it, but that's how they operate. And so there you go. But um, it
Yeah, I mean,
shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately sometimes it is when it comes to racism.
yeah, because I mean, I'm sure a number of us out here, including myself, this is not based on race, but we have been through processes and it was just to fill in a space when they had somebody else in mind. And also, this is what's hard about radio is that also that you're right about the people in charge because the people in charge, they might not just have a perception of the color skin of the kind of people they want, but the behavior. You know what I mean? Like if they don't want you to have a strong personality, they don't want you to work too hard, they don't want you to go too much above your station. Like I'm sure you can relate to this, but a long time ago, I was working with some people and I ended up doing a blog post about this, but I didn't mention their names. But I realized that in radio, I call it the hierarchy of personality. And this is when the people at the top of the hierarchy, they can act how they want, they can swear how they want, they can abuse people how they want, they could do whatever they want, they can express themselves, they can be nice, they can be whatever, because they're at the top of the hierarchy and management is letting them get away with it. Then there are the other people who are low on the hierarchy and they can't do the same thing. Have you noticed
Anyway,
that?
and, oh yeah,
That
from
there's
day
hierarchy
one,
of personality?
from day one, when I got to WLSA, from day one, that's what you see. And once the hierarchy is established, that's pretty much it. I remember I got into an argument with again my first operations manager, Drew. I remember the argument was I was just steamed, and by this time on LS, Edward Doliak and Ty Wansley became the afternoon drive host during this time. And so by this time I knew Edward Doliak. Ed was like, "What's wrong with you?" I said, "Well, I got into a fight with Drew." All right, then. Well, stick with me. We're gonna get him back. So once again, we had these meetings every month. I said earlier in the conversation, and so one month when we had a staff meeting, Brown's Chicken was served for us. And Ed started to cuss Drew out. It was like, wait a minute, what, why got this Brown's Chicken here? Oh, because the sponsor is free. Yeah, don't you like it? No, I don't like this crap. Tell you what, next month I'll take care of the lunch. Don't worry about Brown. No Brown's Chicken next month. I'll take care of it. So Marguerite walked into the green room, and it's served by the people from from the Palmer House. It was laid out beautifully, cutting board. You got the chef with the hat on the medallion and everything. It was just big time. And I remember being next to Ed. He was like, hey, Drew, get out the way. My friend Chris wants to eat. Let him eat. Just little stuff like that, just to get back at my boss. I love every minute of just the little things in life. So that was pretty cool with me. I had it not been for Ed, it never would have happened. So my point is, there are times when you see what the hierarchy is, you're right. It's established that way for a reason, or reasons whoever establishes it. And then once again, you're on the so-called low of the totem pole. You can't do the things that the people do, and you're not allowed to. Like I said earlier in the conversation, we were grunts. We should not even think about being on the air and things of that nature. So, but again, going back to my second operations manager, it was a whole different atmosphere because they set the rules, they set the hierarchy, and everybody had a voice, and everybody felt more comfortable depending on who you are from the first hierarchy. So it depends on who's in charge and what they deem to establish a work environment that everybody could feel good and safe in, and create new ideas and things of that nature. So it depends on who's on top to divvy out again that type of environment in that land.
And then sometimes though people are they sort of gaslight you like a person when they'll say, well, what's the problem here? People are so uptight or so sensitive about this and that. I'm thinking because it's not normal that certain people get a pass. And what I notice also is that in radio, I notice that the people who are in like a little bubble are the ones who have an agent. So if there's a problem, they can just go back to their contractor, they can go to their agent will talk to management, or they're the ones who are in with management in somehow. So like
Mm-hmm.
there might be certain rules of the station, but these people who are in with these management people or through their agent, they don't have to follow the rules. They're exempt from the rules. They can say, I don't want to do XYZ. And they're like, okay, because maybe somebody high up got them there and they like
Mm-hmm.
them. And it doesn't matter how the other people say, hey, wait a second, how come they don't have to do XYZ, but we have to do XYZ? It's not equitable.
Yeah. No, you're right. You look. Listening to you. I'm reliving my life again. It's unfair, but again, they established the rules. So what is fair to you and me not be fair to them? Their definition is different. Their mindset is different. Everything is different because they established who they want to be in there. It's like a private club. It's like we had this club and you're not allowed. Well, how come you're not allowed? Well, don't worry about that. You're not allowed. And not really giving a stent, a really good reason why they just do it. They do it because they can. They do it because they could. They do it because they can. And that's what they had done. So from that perspective, I never could understand it. You have to look at again the people you're dealing with. And so, see, I work nights the majority of my time, so I never get a chance to see a lot of people. I did work days sometimes in my assignments, and a whole different universe because obviously everybody's there. They get a chance to interact with more people, obviously. So with me, I always had the peace and quiet of night, um, me and the board, and listening to the programs and seeing my coworkers come in like 3 a.m. for to start their show at 5 a.m. So yeah, it was nice. It was very content. But going back to management styles, I just was not cool with you stay in one place and I'll stay over here. Don't have aspirations of even if you want to think about getting to management.
But were you guys
There
a
at the time.
union shop?
We were union, yes. By the time well, especially for me, when I became an on-air host, I had to join after.
Oh, you did
Uh,
always join because sometimes when it's a union situation, you can't cross over unless. But then sometimes even if you try to join the union, then management will say, "Oh, well, no, this doesn't fall under union stuff." It's like, but you're asking me to do stuff that's on air. Oh no,
yeah,
that's I didn't ask you to do that. Yes, you did. I have the email. It's just like really
right.
weird.
Yeah, it is weird because I had no problem joining the union because I always wanted to join the union anyway. Plus, you get union scale being on the air, so I have no problem with that. I just think that again, depending on the managerial style, was just you just bump heads. And I've never been one to kiss the ass. I always came from a family that you do a great job, keep your nose clean, let your work speak for itself, and hopefully you should be rewarded by management. That's how I was raised. But again, my mentality of how I was raised and what I think hard work should be, I think, the standard for most people, just in a general sense. But with other people, they have their other ways of getting inside the building. It's not about hard work. It's about who you know. It's about doing the bare minimum and not the rest.
Oh my
It's
gosh, you're
about
right.
pretending to be into radio because you need a job. And once again, it's a sexy business. And so I get paid and everything else. So, Margaret, you can snip out the people who are genuine articles
Yeah.
and the ones who are not. Like, how did you get in here? And everybody has their own story to tell. But yeah, it's just too many slimy people for me. I just
But I know you're saying because that's why I like talking to you because you have a real passion for it. I did meet some people with a real passion for radio, but what's crazy is that okay, you say it's a sexy business. I don't think so, but I think that if you have a passion for radio and then you're surrounded by people who don't, or it's a
mm,
job, or some of them have locked into a really good, like some stations are good union pay. They see, okay, so they've locked into a union job that pays well, so there's no reason for them to go
mm,
because they'll get more and more every year. And then there are other people who have the right connections and they're just in and they'll just be in until things sort of go away or the person they've hooked up with goes away themselves or
Mhm.
until their contract runs out or something.
Right.
But what the problem with being surrounded by people who are not passionate is that they try to take you down for being passionate. I don't know if you've
Exactly.
noticed that.
No, you're right. That's exactly it.
Yeah, and it's funny because you and I never worked together. Maybe I met you offline once at a party. I'm not sure. I don't remember if you were at this guy's party in Kenwood, but yeah, that's what I noticed. And I see for me personally, I just got to the point where I thought, okay, well, I know I'm a good asset to the organization and I'm being targeted and I can't deal with this anymore. Because you're talking. So I used to take stuff in stride like you're taking. I thought, well, it's a business, it's challenges, and I just got to the point where I thought, especially after the pandemic, I thought, no, I can't do this anymore. I can't be treated like this anymore. I can't pretend that this kind of behavior is good and that I'm in the wrong and everybody else is behaving the same way, but for some reason, I'm wrong. So
I I put it like this, and some people just soothsayers. I remember when I was back at Columbia, I took a course called Profile of Disc Jockey, who was spearheaded by the great Terry Hemritt from WXRT. She was a
yeah, she's so great.
man. She's brilliant.
Gosh, but also she's such a good person.
She's next level. Yeah, she's just
Yeah,
salt
she's
of the
next
earth.
level.
She's sweet, and she was my instructor and my colleague when I went back to teach in 2000. So when I was a student, this is like the spring of 1988 when I was there, and I took her course. So the final was to interview a Chicago disc jockey. I interviewed Kevin Matthews, and I love Kev from day one. I was a fan of his, been a Kev head ever since. Which to me, I created base heads who followed me was because of my love for Kevin Matthews. So I interview him, and the first thing he says to me, Chris, the one thing you'll discover is that there are a lot of a-holes in this business. That was the first thing out of his mouth before he went right to the interview and I
That is
recorded.
so wow.
But
And he
but
was
he
during the
was
heyday. And he was during the
right.
heyday.
This was like he was 6 months in. I
Wow.
interviewed him. He was doing middays, and I got a chance to interview him that Saturday. He did midday Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. on the Loop AM 1000. And I got there an hour early, and we sat down and interviewed him for an hour. And I got a chance to watch him work afterwards. That was the highlight of the whole thing. I see him do the Jim Shorts character back and forth. And this is when I really fell in love with what he was doing. He's the only person in the studio, just me and him, but obviously I'm watching. He has the mic, of course, talking. He popped up the second mic and put it on for Jim. That's how much he's in tune
Wow.
with that character. I was like, that's cool. That right there is cool. So I saw this go back to my enthusiasm for the business and people like that. But when he told me that, Margaret, he was absolutely correct about the a-holes in his business. That gave me the sixth sense to look out for people like that. And there are a lot of them. I stopped counting.
Mm-hmm. You're not one of them. I mean, there are good people in the business, but I was just surprised by the number of people who are not passionate about it and it doesn't take them through. It's like the games they play that take them
Yes.
through. And
Right.
also another thing I noticed is there's a perception of certain people that they'll do a job, but they're barely working and yet they fail upwards. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I know exactly what you're talking
I feel
about. I've
like
seen it firsthand.
me too. But the thing is that I think that what's good about digital media, well, let's talk about digital media because,
Yes.
we're talking about terrestrial. How do you think digital media changed the game for you that you saw?
It gave me more control. Me personally, it gave me more power. It empowered me.
But what
And
about
so,
like in the business? Like when you saw digital come up in the business, did you see the writing on the wall for the business or?
no, I didn't see the writing on the wall. I think there had to be a acknowledgement and a partnership because, as you know, all of a sudden the stations, terrestrial stations, had to have what a internet component, or whatever it is, call it .com or something. So you had to embrace it. Not only that, you also, depending on your ears, you can listen to the online, for example. Say, for example, it was once again here in Chicago, the Score, WSCR AM, their sports station. I listened to one time their .com for all day, and I was going back and forth between that and the terrestrial station, 670 AM. You'll hear different spots.
Mhm.
on both stations. You may have some spots that are aligned for both the digital and for both terrestrial, but then depending on the break, you'll hear different spots for either one.
Mm-hmm.
So they're catering to the audience in that time. And now when they realize that the future will be online. So a lot of people, like, we have these phones now, you get all type of information on it, or radio stations. Do we do still like terrestrial stations? That's not like the transistor radio being reinvented all over again. If you, depending on your audience who remembers that. So like the whole adage, everything old is new again. I think again for me, watching the digital media create, I was on board because I had my fill of terrestrial radio. I was tired. I was burnt out. I got tired of dealing with certain management styles. So when digital media was phasing in, that was enough for me to say, look, let me check this out and try it out from there. So as you know, Margaret, back in the day in terrestrial radio, if you were on air talent, they would fire you, say in the middle of the week, like say like Wednesday. And then it came out a newspaper back then. We had Frieder's column, go Robert Frieder, the Chicago Sun-Times, and find out that somebody got axed. But nowadays, because of everybody having their websites and media sites and everything else, they can continue on working, like you, myself, and others, where we have another life form to look at. And so to me, digital media, podcasting is a saving grace for myself personally as a communicator, because I get a chance to do more. I get a chance to be more in control, and it goes a long way, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, and how do you prep? Because you said you do a lot of prep. How do you do that?
I prep during the week. I check out all the sites. I'll go on Associated Press, for example, HollywoodReporter.com, MSNBC, all the major networks, CNN and stuff like that, even Fox News, even though that gives me the willies. I'll check it out from time to time to see what they're talking about, and then put the show together during the week. And before I do the Saturday morning show at 7 a.m., I'm up at about 4, no later than 5, and I'll prep right up into showtime at 7 a.m.
And do you take notes, or how do
Oh
you
yeah, I take,
stay on
yeah.
top of it?
Well, what I do, I take notes. I have a legal pad. I take notes and I give. What it's a story that I'm going to do. Say it's about Trump and the trial. I put that down, and I'll get a story to footnote the list that I have. It could be about that. It could be about AOC, from Margaret, Marjorie Taylor Greene and stuff like that. That type of thing. So I'll footnote it, have a story to connect with it, and I'll put it in a file on my phone. So by the time I go over, I'm going over each footnote, each story, jot down some notes. I may simply see something on CNN that comes to, say, for example, some sort of percentage when it comes to who's going to vote for who, and I'll jot that down. So all these notes I have compiled throughout the whole week. So by the time Saturday hits, it's all in order.
Okay, but I have a question. When you're doing topical talk radio,
Mm-hmm.
and then somebody calls up and they're very knowledgeable about it, and they're sort of saying things that you don't really know. Like, okay, this is what I think that Rush Limbaugh used to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think he sometimes dumped people. I know he dumped people who were rude to him, but I think also when people sort of put him in a corner, I think he did dump some of those people. Because sometimes they bring up a point and they're getting into the weeds, and then sometimes the host cannot be in control. Or sometimes I notice that with some guys, people will bring up points, and then the guys will keep hammering on the same points, his own points,
Yeah.
even though the caller's going a different way. But how do you deal with callers who seem to know more?
So when I was back on terrestrial radio, I can still do it now as I have my own phone line and I do my show on Saturday mornings. If I get a caller like that, there's nothing wrong with different ideas, but you do have callers sometimes who, well, I say want to try to take over the show.
Mhm.
They want to be, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having knowledge because that's what I want as the host, but you're not going to take over the program. You're not going to take over the show. And some people didn't want to overtalk you and things like that. And so in comparison to terrestrial radio and what I do now, as a host yourself, you can get out of the call without everybody know. For example, when we were back in doing terrestrial radio and a caller had was like that, kind of overbearing and getting their point across and everything else, then while they're talking, you could pot them down or have the producer pot them down and say, look, Edward does a very good point. I think the economy should get to a point of stability. I thank you for the call and move on. You dumped them about 2 minutes ago.
Okay.
But as the host, you have to keep it seamless
Mhm.
and keep it going. So you dumped the call 2 minutes ago, but I'm not exposing anything, but that's what I would do. And that's what most hosts would do if they want to, unless you're like Other people like to be combative and go back and forth and do the punching thing. I don't. Depending on what mood you catch me in, I don't mind doing it because it becomes entertaining if you know how to do it right. But other than that, I think certain people, whether they subconsciously or consciously do it, want to try to take over your show, and that's a danger zone for me. You stay where you are. I appreciate it for you calling in. I want to hear your point of view, but get your own show if you feel that
Yeah.
strongly about it.
Yeah. And also I noticed that you were mentioning FM hosts. Okay, there's some I listen to FM radio just because I want or FM music radio just because I want to hear what they have to say. And their voices are so amazing. First of all, a lot of the women are fantastic on the
Mm-hmm.
FM side, FM music. And also I noticed that you can tell they're really trying to connect with the listeners. But what I did notice is what you're talking about. Sometimes when they try to do talk radio, they didn't have a strong enough personality to control the boat, to control the ship. And they were trying to be balanced with the listeners. And like you said, they didn't call in. So how did they? I mean, what advice do you have for people who do want to make the change?
I would say the advice I would give is to read more. Whatever your reading level is, read more. Pick up something, go to your phone. If you see a story on the news, go to it on your phone and read it verbatim and read it out loud. Because if you ever make the transition of doing, say, FM music show to becoming a host, you need content and you need recall. So if you continue to read, you'll have more to recall. And I think that's a better way to go because if you're FM jock, all you do is, of course, backsell the songs, you do time and temp, custom live spots, and that's pretty much it. I mean, that's what FM jocks do. I'm not degrading it, but you're talking about going from that being segmented per hour to an hour where your voice carries the whole hour, with the exception of breaks, obviously. So you need to fill in the rest of that time. It's not music anymore; it's you. So read more, get more content. So by the time you make the hit to do talk, you won't be as overwhelmed, I believe.
Yeah, I think also what helps is creating a story. That's why Rush was so amazing because
Yes.
you have your angle and then you can tell a story. And then if callers call in, that's fine, but they can become part of the story.
You have to be a good storyteller.
Yeah.
You have to be. Else it won't work. I went back and studied Jack Parr, the second host
Oh.
of the Night Show. Jack Parr was brilliant. Jack Parr, he was probably the best monologist during that time as second host of the Night Show.
Are
He
you talking
had
about his
this
TV show?
TV show was, I mean, brilliant. And so here's a guy who took over for Steve Allen. Steve Allen's more entertainment skits type of host. And here comes Jack, the exact opposite, who talked to the audience. Not saying that Steve didn't, but Jack Parr more so. And Jack always had this line, look, you gotta believe me, we got nothing here. So if you believe him, the story came off well. He hit the mark, he hit the jokes, he hit everything else because you bought into what he was saying. And so I took that as an element of what I wanted to become as a host. I studied Malcolm X. Now, some people say, why Malcolm X? When you watch Malcolm X in not long form, but short form and being interviewed by cameras, he knew how to use time. If he had a minute 50 or 30 seconds or 28 or something like that, he knew what the message is to get into that. He knew about clock management.
Hmm. How
I
did he
studied
know
him.
that? Do you know how he knew that?
I think part of it was instinctual, but I think at the same time he knew because of who he was and the dynamic of him being part of the Nation of Islam, being controversial, and the cameras in front of him. He knew what to work with. So all these microphones in front of him, I got this much time to get the message out. That's what he did. You go back and watch on YouTube, not the big speeches, but just the little sinks here and there. That I said, that's cold because he would get it out and keep it moving.
I
Clock
wonder.
management.
Yeah, have you ever read his biography? I wonder how because I mean, I know that people can be incredibly, I know that people know things right away, but I wonder how he developed. There must have been a way that he developed. I wonder if he did ever radio, but do you know anything about his background?
Not radio. He would appear on radio to debate. I remember that a few times. I caught some of those. In fact, those debates sometimes you get on YouTube and hear those as well. So that and his long speeches, but again, when he was able to be out in the public and knew how much time to have to get what he had to say out there. I just thought was the man was just sheer fantastic, and so I started study that. And I go back and listen to monologues of Richard Pryor and um, who else I liked, Bill Cosby and people like that during that time, where they were able to weave that story and tell it so well that you went from A all the way to Z, and you take the ride all over again. So
Yeah, I don't know.
storytelling is key.
Yeah, I didn't know if you ever saw documentaries about Richard Pryor. I saw one recently on I think it was on Paramount, but I've seen a bunch of them. But he also cut his teeth. I mean, he did work really hard to solidify his storytelling skills, especially when he was on the West Coast.
No, exactly. He had to find his voice. I said earlier about finding your voice. See, what you can do, again, I said earlier in the conversation, you can't be somebody else. And again, you may subconsciously do that person and say you're doing on the radio, somebody you admire, but eventually you have to find your voice. Richard Pryor was interesting because he tried to be Bill Cosby in his earlier years. He was not, he had to, Bill Cosby wore the suit. He had on like a cardigan sweater and, white shirt and everything, trying to be somebody that he wasn't. And it wasn't until the late 60s, 70s when he became more militant and realized the street was where he got his content from, the winos and the hookers and the whores like that. And he was able to take that and compartmentalize it and then do it through his act. That was his voice. That was the authentic Richard Pryor, instead of being trying to be somebody else.
Now, do you think it's possible to be yourself in just everyday life, including at work? Because
It,
I think especially at work, you have to really clamp it down.
you have to. Everybody wears masks, when they go out in public and things like that, and when they go to the job or something. Yeah, you're clamped down. You can't be, buck wild, like, depending on your personality when you want to get down like that. But I do believe, yeah, there's a monotone version of ourselves. Obviously, how we comport ourselves in public. But again, that's why when I saw those talk hosts hit that microphone, cut loose. They can cut loose. They don't worry about it. They can, just as a go for broke. And that's what made it great when you could see them, of course, being, hey, how you doing? And then get on the air and just, go from 0 to 100. And that's what made it, I think, very enjoyable to listen to. And phasing to where we are now, digital media and podcasting. I mean, it's great to have all this variety out there. And some may say it's overflux, but I like it because you get a chance to pick and choose who you like to hear and get their take on things. And once again, it may not be as polished, but it's out there nonetheless. So I think like anything else, you gravitate towards what you like. And going back to Rush real quick, I agree. Somebody on there but he rarely had somebody that would challenge him
He
because
rare, yeah.
again, it very rare. And so they put him on there. But again, if that person was on there, like I said, he would get rid of him like 2 or 3 minutes in, and well, you know what, Robert, I think that when that happens again, that we should be more prepared. Thank you for the call. And go to the next caller, go
Or
to
he
the
call
break
them
and everything
seminar
else.
callers.
Exactly right.
The
Right.
seminar caller.
Oh man. So it was the dynamic of the host, he or she has to bring something that nobody else brings, and that is they bring themselves to the microphone. That's the only thing you can do. Now, do you know how to be yourself or create a persona? Like I said earlier in the conversation, or is it a mixture of the two? We don't know with certain people. I've been on the mindset, be yourself, and being yourself is finding yourself. So you need time to season, like I said before, when I was coming to talk radio, they want their host no younger than 35 at that point. At least at 35, you've been some through experiences, stuff like that. So you're able to relate to the audience from a perspective of content and storytelling and monologuing and a whole nine. I think to me, when I realized I wanted to do talk radio was the most challenging for me. And I'm glad I made the decision to do it because I love every minute of it. Every minute of it.
Yeah, what do you think about, let's talk about the age thing because now it's trendy to move away from older people. And okay, part of it is skill level. Like people want to make sure that people have the skills. But there's also a perception that older people don't know anything. I mean, I've seen this in radio. Let's get back to radio, the radio business. I've seen radio bosses hire somebody who's pretty clueless and they need a lot of help with tech, but they're hired because of the perception that they do know tech because they're like 23 or whatever. But what do you think is the argument for having somebody who's older?
I think it could be done right, but again, going back to, of course, demographics of the age range of people listen to that particular radio station and what they bring to the table. And so I'll just share this with you. So when I was back at WGCI FM, this is when I was filling in doing news for Ty Wansley. Our boss had, well, this is when they started the HD radio. So my boss, well, Ty was telling me that the PD offered him a Monday through Friday midday talk show on the HD because they needed content. And he said, "Well, I'm pretty busy, but maybe we'll talk to Chris about it. Maybe he'll be interested in doing it." So Ty tells me about it. I said, "Well, you said, well, give them a call, see what they say." So I gave them a call, and they told me that we're going to go with an 18-year-old to host it. I'm like, 18? What 18-year-old? Well, we think we want a younger person and everything else. And I felt insulted during that time. I had the experience, but they want to go with someone with no experience, which made no sense to me, no matter how old they were, they had no experience. So again, these management styles, I don't understand. Maybe, I don't know. I think that again, I think experience does count for something. And it does show in the person's work of their agility, of their ability, and their time on the mic or behind the scenes, whatever. This is about people on the microphone who are older. You can benefit from that. But again, as society is, we have a habit of not listening to our older people. Put them in the home and have them eat rice pudding and stuff like that. We want to make sure their teeth's in their mouth and they have their shawl on, and put them in a rocking chair. And we denounce old people in our society, but for the ones who do not, for the ones who don't go along with society dictates, then you're able to have an older host. He or she can bring to the microphone their experience and what they bring to the table, which I think is great.
Well, see, what I think also is what I noticed that was ridiculous is I can see on air, like you have to appeal to a certain age, so you should have younger people to appeal to them. But
Mm-hmm.
then what I noticed is even behind the scenes, they chose people based on that. And I thought, okay, so when they don't know how to do something, I have to teach them how to do it because that's what's happened. Or one time somebody took some work away from me and gave it to somebody else who didn't know stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, and then they wanted me to train that person. I thought, so why can't I just keep doing it? I mean, that was in my head.
Yeah.
So,
To me, like I said before, the right thing to do would be to, of course, listen to you, train these people. And again, some people look, she's trained them. Maybe she should do it. Maybe she should be the host of the program, things like that. And again, that gets into whatever the managerial style is that you're up against or working with or trying to work with, etc. And so, to me, sometimes you have talent running underneath your nose, but don't want to acknowledge the person. And somebody gets so that's silly. I'll share another story. So again, I'm back at LS. Ty once gives me a call and says, "How soon can you give me a news anchor demo too?" I said, "I can get it to you like in a couple of days." Ty will take some time off, and he recommended me to then WGCI when they were on 332 South Michigan, where the station was located at. So he says, "Give me the." We have CDs back then. Give me resume and CD. I get to my boss, and I should be able to get you in quickly. I said, "Cool." So I did the demo. It was a 5-minute news demo. Did that, resume in hand, everything else. He said, "Get it. I'm gonna have somebody meet you at the lobby, give it to them, and then we'll get on board." So again, I worked from midnight to 5 a.m. Got off at 5 a.m. Went to the radio station, gave it to the guy at 332 South Michigan, gave it to Ty. Ty loved it, gave it to the boss. The boss says he sounds good, but he doesn't sound like you, Ty. And Ty was like, "What in the hell is that? He's not supposed to sound like me. He's supposed to sound like himself. He has an authoritative voice. I think it'd be great. No, he doesn't sound like you." Now, once again, I think it's a stupid response if it was me or somebody else. But again, you deal with these idiots who, once again, how did you get in the building? Now, once again, if even if it was somebody else that was auditioning, because me, I didn't sound like Ty Wansley, I didn't get the job.
hmm. Yeah, that doesn't make sense because he's who he is. And
Thank
then
you.
so then you get somebody else who shines in some way that's strong. Yeah,
Right.
that's strange.
It is strange.
So
And so,
anything yeah.
you go right ahead, please.
Yeah, we're talking about all these negative things, but the bottom line though is like you said before, and I keep thinking about it, is you really love to do something that'll carry you through all, through all the struggles and so forth. And here we are, we're discussing this in a digital form, not terrestrial. But any other closing thoughts? Because I have a meeting soon, a podcasting meeting soon.
Oh, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. I really enjoyed myself. Closing thoughts, like anything else, I believe that whatever comes in your way negative, you can beat it down and it makes you stronger. You have to realize that you can't be beat up forever. Don't be a victim. Take time out to analyze who you are and what you want to become. And don't let anybody tell you differently. Do not let somebody put their knee on your neck professionally, personally, and beyond. You know who you are. Become that person and strive.
And you alluded to the knee in the neck. So what about the racial stuff? I mean, what if people are experiencing that as well?
It's the same thing. Some people won't like you just by you walking into the room, and they are the ones who are losing out because if the both of you met, you probably learned something from each other. You probably have some more likes than dislikes of the person. But see, that takes discipline. I think for me, it's very easy to be stupid, but if you're intelligent and smart, that requires discipline, discipline on the mind. And if you're true to yourself, you can be true to others. If you love yourself, you can love others. It starts from within, it starts from you. And so if you don't do that, then of course you're going to hate somebody else because you hate yourself. Of course you dislike somebody because you don't like yourself. And so you don't have an answer for it because you're not taking time out to find out who the hell you are. Once you establish that, you're on your way and there's nobody nothing to do about it. Despite racism, despite jealousy, despite the haters, at the end of any proverbial day, you're going to be yourself. And some people
Now,
get on board and some people don't have to get on board.
now, how do you figure out who you are? Because I see a lot of people who seem to not have a core.
For me, I've embraced everything. I don't just do the negative, do the positive. It's the balance. It's scars and all. There's nothing perfect about me. I don't walk on water. I'm not changing water to wine. I'm far from it. I think once you establish who you are from the standpoint of how you treat people, how you treat your family, how you treat your friends, how you treat your coworkers, how people look at you on the street. You don't have to know that person. How you're able to, as Jerry Butler once said, have the ability to walk with kings and queens and still have the common touch. If you're the same person, no matter where you go in life, that says a lot about you. So you're not code switching. Some people code switch. I understand that too. Some people, once again, become somebody else different. We talked about masks earlier in the conversation, things like that. And that's just a survival tactic because, again, you don't want your heart to be broken. You don't want to be in fear. You don't want to be in a position where you might have to do something you don't want to do. But again, if you know who you are and study who you are and realize this is who I am, I can always get better. Once you establish that core, then everything else will fall into place. I guarantee it because it happened to me. I think again, once again, I ain't that brilliant. I'll tell you that right now. But I do believe that things happen for a reason. And I think once me personally, understand what the reasoning is, I can move forward. Moving forward is the key thing.
And then what about the code switching for survival?
Oh, absolutely. That happens all the time. But make sure you're able to cut it off if you code switch. Sometimes we have a problem cutting it off. Sometimes we're stuck on automatic, and that becomes a version of us. But it's not a version, I believe, of freedom of who we are. And once we establish the freedom of who we are, I know I sound like I should be giving out prayer clause, something like that. I don't mean to sound that way, but the establishing of self is the journey that continues. And once again, don't be comfortable where you are. Challenge yourself. Do something different. Once again, if you're not into politics, maybe look at it for a little bit. Maybe read about international politics and do something a little different. Again, just to challenge yourself. Challenging yourself, I think, is the most fun thing to do because again, you just might surprise yourself. You just might. I didn't know I could do that, but yeah, see, you did it.
Okay.